Hello folks, welcome back. So as I mentioned in my last video, I will of course be making my new lathe duplicator, and this will be a two-part video. Now just before I get started, I thought I would quickly mention something. Now because I started this build such a long time ago, and that's not necessarily because it's a particularly complicated project, because it's not, but because I did start it such a long time ago, I was in fact using my old video camera, and so the quality of the first part of this video anyway is not quite as good as my regular videos, so apologies for that. There wasn't really much I could do about it. I'd already started the build, so I couldn't really go back and reshoot all the stuff, so you're just going to have to bear with me for this first part of the video. So the first stage of this build is to make these rails which the router will run along, and that will produce the X direction of motion, and the rails are made of this aluminium angle which provides a nice smooth surface for the bearings to run against. And to start out, I'm going to make these small supports which hold the aluminium angle. And now I'm using glue and screws to attach those supports to two MDF risers which I cut. So to finish off the rails, I'm just screwing this aluminium angle to the support. So with the rails done now, I'm attaching them to the base, and I've already gone ahead and done that to the first one. To attach the rails, I'm going to be using a combination of dowels which will be held in dry and screws. I'm not actually gluing these together just in case I want to take them apart at some point. Although I happen to be screwing in from the underside in this instance, I do think that this would be a good opportunity to use pocket hole screws if you have them. And finally, to provide some support for the rails, I'm placing a few spacers along the length of the rails. Now depending on the length of these spacers, small adjustments can actually be made to how tight the fit is between the router and the rails. Now next up I have to make the carriage, and this time instead of using a chamfer bit at the router table, I'm actually using the table saw. So to allow the carriage to run along the rails, I'm using bearings like you can see here, and they sort of ride along like that. Now I've still got to do the other side, and that means tapping into another piece of aluminium angle. So I'm going to head over to the drill press first and drill out the holes to attach the bearings. To speed up the tapping process, I'm actually using a cordless drill. One thing I've also just done is to drill in at an angle to provide a bit of clearance for the bolts which attach the bearings on. Now finally, with the aluminium angle attached with a few small screws, I'm just attaching the final bearings like I did on the other side. And so with that done now, it just simply slides onto the rails like that. So to continue work on the carriage, what I'm going to work on next is what I suppose you could call the Y direction of travel. Now to do that, I'm actually going to use these keyboard draw slides, which a lot of folks seem to use for the linear motion on a slot mortiser, so these should work fairly well. So the first step, like I've done on this one, is to remove the brackets which are welded on. To do that, I'm just going to drill through the welds over at the drill press. Because I don't want this big overhang here at the back, I'm actually cutting the draw runners shorter, like you can see with this first one. So to help me with alignment of these draw slides, I've actually put together this little jig which references off the side of the carriage and helps me to position the 2 drawer slides, and I actually got this idea from Matthias Wandel, so thanks to him. And I just used exactly the same process to attach the other halves of the runner to the top of the carriage, and so now if I flip this round I should be able to slot it on. Seems fairly smooth. So there will in fact be 3 plans available for this duplicator, as well as the SketchUp model, which you can go ahead and take a look at as well. So if you do want to build this yourself, then you can go right ahead and do so. Right folks, that's about it for this time, but be sure to stay tuned for part 2, which will be coming to you very soon.